as bad as it is for all the private companies trying to get into government, it's super tough for the agencies to go get the software they want to. And so that's where these FedRAMP changes, like everyone agrees the process needs to be better, right? Agency needs to be able to get softwares they need quicker. Cloud service providers need to be able to sell to the federal government in a way that's not filled with like bureaucracy and technicality and some of these things that have just, you know, we've been beating this drum for years now that are just kind of dumb. And so that's where GSA and FedRAMP announced FedRAMP 20x. So new goals, they want to make this whole process more streamlined. Let's jump into some of the things that are, some of the things we know from the announcements.
Welcome to the Paramify podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Scott, and
Mike Schreiner.
We're so excited to be here today. Lots of things are changing in our world.
Changes in the air. Yep. It's a
That's right.
time.
It's a great time to be alive. We all got new shoes on, I noticed.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Strong.
Keaton's got some, dude, those are dope. I like those. Yeah. Okay. Then I got my DCs because they're comfortable.
Skater boy.
Man, I want to do a heel flip.
He said, see you later, boy.
Yeah.
So we plan today to come in and re-record our wildly popular video on the FedRAMP process, viewed by dozens of thousands of covert listeners across the United States.
Yeah, and everybody, we get like, you know, the snarky comments, isn't this gonna change? You know, I'm like, yeah, but the thing is that when something's super entrenched like it is, it's going to take a lot of work, you know, and we're going to be part of that. You know, you're going to be part of that. If you're listening to this, you're probably part of some of the changes that are happening. A lot of people listen to the Pete Waterman podcast that we recently put out. It was very well received by the community, and I'm so grateful to Pete for doing that with us. Really important. I never really thought very much about how painful it is for government.
From the agency side.
Yeah, from the agency side.
Yeah.
You know?
As bad as it is for all the private companies trying to get into government, it's super tough for the agencies to go get the software they want to. And so that's where these FedRAMP changes, like everyone agrees the process needs to be better, right? Agency needs to be able to get softwares they need quicker. Cloud service providers need to be able to sell to the federal government in a way that's not filled with like bureaucracy and technicality and some of these things that have just, you know, we've been beating this drum for years now that are just kind of dumb.
Right.
And so that's where GSA and FedRAMP announced FedRAMP 20x. So new goals, they want to make this whole process more streamlined. Let's jump into some of the things that are, some of the things we know from the announcements.
Yeah. Yeah. So number one, I would say FedRAMP is still the law, right?
Right.
So if you're a cloud service provider and you want to sell your services to the government, you need to be FedRAMP, right? And you're going to need to be authorized at a level, you know, depending on, at a level that meets, you know, the security requirements, right? So if it's low impact data, low FedRAMP low, or low impact SaaS, you know, that path sounds like that's going to get a lot easier, faster. And that's exciting.
Yeah, that would be great. It's, you know, most federal agencies never ATO'd a FedRAMP product because of how tough it was on their end.
Right.
And yeah, that's one of the things we know from the early stages, and we'll dive into that in a second. So, but yeah, so FedRAMP is still the law. You still have to be ATO to sell to a federal agency. The other thing we know from the announcements is right now, the path is still the path.
Number two, the path is the path. That means that the FedRAMP, so the Rev 5 process, you're still going to need an authorizing agency. And I did a little, you know, when Pete was saying, like, he said, hey, we're not going to have agency sponsors anymore. And so I did a little Voldemort, because remember we talked about the Elder Wand. If I had the Elder Wand,
that's right.
You know, we would, you know, this is what I do. I get rid of that sponsorship so people would get off their ungrateful derrieres and, start actually implementing great security, right? Yep. Don't make some sort of technicality a reason for waiting. So that's where I was coming from. A lot of people were pretty upset that I did the Voldemort of Abacadabra thing, like Chow agency sponsorship. It wasn't super well received by everybody, so that's not what I meant. So I made an edit to that. That is still the path. Agencies, maybe what Pete told us is that that's a misnomer, sponsorship. Mm-hmm. Agencies are the ones that own the risk. So that could never be owned by FedRAMP, which is what's so exciting about this process, right?
That's right.
Agencies could never own the risk. Agencies do own the risk, right? And if FedRAMP goes through this long, elaborate process and they don't own the risk, like what for? Right? Why would you do that?
Yeah, and it's likely one of the reasons that we saw a lot of the difficult process evolve to be really difficult is because FedRAMP was taking on some risk by saying like, yeah, we've reviewed this and we're approving it. And then whenever you're taking on risk and you don't actually own like the process and all of it, then you try to cover cross every T, dot every I, make sure everything's perfect.
Right.
So that you can stand in a defensible position and be like, hey, we did everything we could.
Right.
And so it makes a lot of sense to push back to the agencies. Right now, the path is still get an agency. You've got to go through.
They need to like your product.
They've got to like your product. You've got to meet all the security standards. There's a lot of security work to do in FedRAMP. You've got to do all your reporting. So right now, the path is the path. The changes that were announced are aspirational. They're saying this is what we want FedRAMP to evolve into. And that's what we're excited about is it's going to evolve into something that is better. And what we've always said is FedRAMP as a security standard is actually pretty awesome. The process sucked. Still sucks until these aspirational changes evolve.
Certain things really do. Some things you just have to do, like, and we talk about this a lot. Security is almost always at odds with functionality, right, of applications. So a lot of times people get into dev because they want to build cool stuff. Like when you're a developer and you're behind the keyboard and you're creating stuff, you're kind of the god of your world, right? You're creating things and it's super awesome. You get instant feedback. That's what's so cool about programming. That's what's so cool about design. I mean, I've been there, right? You're in there and you're willing something to existence that didn't exist before. That's a really exciting thing. And then like security kind of just gets in the way of that. I mention this all the time. If I implement FIPS mode, that's nothing that you're going to see. It's going to add nothing to the function of your product. In fact, it could be degraded if you implement it incorrectly. And so you got to find an elegant way to implement something securely. So it's just something that if you find a dev that loves implementing security, that's, you just cherish that dev and you hug them and if he wants to be hugged, right?
Yeah. You speak a lot of people don't speak his love language. Yeah.
That's right. So
this is why we're so good at marriage.
That's right. Yeah, and we even have a married couple on our team.
Yeah.
They're married, and so when they have marriage issues, they can just work it out through HR, right? Which is
that's ideal. All couples should work together.
I know.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry, I digress.
FedRAMP's still the law.
Yeah.
We know the process is still the process. Right now, if you're looking for an ATO, and one thing that to call out here is phase 1 that was announced, these aspirational changes. The way the process is going to work is they're going to have working groups. So industry's going to bear a lot of that burden. We'll talk about that. And they're going to come up with solutions, bring things to the table, but it's all going to be focused at the start on FedRAMP low impact SaaS and low. So if you are in the process of pursuing an ATO at FedRAMP moderate or FedRAMP high level, the suggestion would probably be don't wait around for the changes to start the new process.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because FedRAMP, what we do know also is that the PMO's role is more of a standards role, right? So they will QA packages, but that process is going to be very quick. there were times when people would start to freak out if you weren't using the right template. Like there's a little footer at the bottom of an SSP that has like zeros and ones, zeros and ones, it has the graphics and the branding. It looks nice, right? There's nothing wrong with that, but when that branding or when the template was off, you get a lot of scrutiny. The reason for that is because they just want to make sure that you're doing what you say you do, or what you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, so PMO's role will be a standards organization. Ergo, it's going to go faster.
Yeah.
Right. So this is now like pedal to the metal, man.
Yeah. No more year-long waits in the PMO.
Yeah.
It's going to be, you go through your audit, 3PO stamps it, you work with your agency, they approve it, and the PMO QAs a couple things and says, awesome, you're in the marketplace.
Yeah.
So it will speed up that process a lot.
That's
what
awesome.
we say. If you're working on
exciting.
it, finish it. Push it ahead. FedRAMP high especially, even moderate. I think you're doing yourself a disservice to wait around for these changes to happen.
That's right. Go and get it done.
Yep.
That is actually that's the most exciting thing to me, right? So yeah, it's going to go faster already. All right.
Because the process now, so we touched on it a tiny bit, but the process is going to be they're announcing, hey, aspirationally, we want to see some of these changes. Let's start with FedRAMP low, and let's bring in industry. We're going to have working groups. Mm-hmm. Everyone's going to bring their good ideas. They're going to bring the ways they think it could be improved, innovations they have, whatever, and try to come up with something that, the FedRAMP office's approach has kind of been, we need to enforce the standard. We don't actually need to enforce the how. There's a lot of different ways that you can do all these things. So let's talk about the principles of this. It's good security. We talk about all the time, right? You've got to plan out good security. You got to implement it. You got to report it. Still need to do all those things, but they can probably look differently. But it's going to start at low, and industry is going to come in and help solve all of those problems.
Yeah, there's one thing I wanted to talk about. I can't remember. Give me a second. Let me check my notes. What else did you want to talk about? Let me check my notes. Okay.
I think the call out there would be a lot of people, Paramify being one of them, but a lot more on top of that, have solutions for a lot of these processes, right? And things we've been, kind of pressing on for a while. Yeah. And so I think the call out there is come to the table with those things. Like as this process gets better, even if it's from a countrywide perspective, if every company did FedRAMP, we're all better off, right? And so there's a lot of ways that everyone, the market is huge. It's going to get bigger and bigger with these changes. And so come be part of it. Come be part of the working groups. Come share the innovations that you have, and let's all push on it together. We'll be there.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll get to hang out with Kenny.
You could be so lucky.
You could be so lucky.
Yeah.
Homeschool Boy 11, we'd love to meet you.
Yeah. We think,
maybe.
I think I would. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So let's actually dive into some of the things that Pete talked about, right? I'd really like to focus on those for a second, right? So one thing that Pete talked about was how long it took, to get authorized, right? I know we talked about it, but the reason for that is it's just there's so many steps, right? And some of them are wrong. The thing is that, this is what I wanted to talk about. So Pete's analogy of like, hey, you take a system and you build it out. And you do all the dev work on that one time. And once it's dev'd and it's complete, that's it. The system never changes. And so you put it in a system security plan and it never changes, and you ship it off to sea and it never changes. And that's what it is. But that has not, and what he said in the announcements is like, that's never how we've done it. He talked about it in our podcast as well. That's not how we do it. We're always changing. We're always innovating. And that's what made it so hard in the SSP. Because if you change your identity as a service provider, it's going to show up in 59 different places within the SSP, within the different appendices. Look, people want to know things in the way they want to know them. that's fine. I get that, right? That's why we have jobs, right? You need to be able to communicate in the way that people want to see it. But what FedRAMP, the problem is that FedRAMP was like, okay, everybody wants to see this, and so there's like 800 or so requirements, and just the redundancy, throughout those different requirements with slight nuance cause a lot of friction, right? Where you're gonna have to, okay, now I have to do it here, 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 and if the system never changes, great. But that's not how it is. Even if the system never changed, it's still really hard.
Yeah.
And it's still like prone to lots of error, lots of QA, because you have to do it manually. So what we need to do is just, as an industry, we can find, what are the things that people do. So one of the great things about Paramify is that we've always focused on that from the very beginning. It's like, hey, so what are you using for your single sign-on solution? Okta. Great. So is everybody else. Like most people are. I know there's other solutions coming in that are amazing, right? But Okta's worked really hard, to make that experience like really, really awesome, from a user perspective, and make it really easy to implement security, right? Single sign-on being a super powerful solution. The way that you implement encryption varies, so Pete talked about, lots of different ways. Like, so there's automated validation where a compliance tool can scan, configurations automatically. You see, you have a little compliance robot that's like checking. That compliance robot will have to have a lot of permissions, but hey, as long as you secure the compliance robot, great. Infrastructure as code is another way, right? So that's how we do it, right? So we have our infrastructure. This is how it needs to be implemented, and then we use this. We use a secrets manager to rotate those keys, right, and to protect those. There's automated enforcement things, file integrity protection that we've always been asking, and so we've known where to put those, within the document. The bad news is that we're all different people, all different organizations. FedRAMP, even when it's FedRAMP High, it did give a lot of assurance to a lot of people. So that absolutely, that it becomes a no-brainer for agencies.
Right.
When we talk to them, they're like, "Yeah, you're FedRAMP. Oh my gosh, great. FedRAMP High, great. I have no worries. Let's do this. This is gonna go fast."
Yeah.
If it's FedRAMP low, they'll be like, "Okay, we just better not send this data into here." So that's cool. It might work for certain scenarios. So, anyway, you need to focus on how do you implement great security. You don't do that going control by control by control by control by control, right?
Yeah, and we put together a whole series of podcasts on this. It's worth listening to. But it's cool to see the FedRAMP office start to.
That's what they did.
Start to mirror that same approach, that if you're going to do great security, it's a lot easier to focus on capabilities than controls. When you're focusing on 724 control requirements, it becomes a rubber stamping exercise. When you're focusing on how do we build a great security program that meets these standards, then you get great security, and compliance is just the outcome.
Yep. So you have the other one that says, hey, encryption configured properly. True. Great. MFA configured properly for the scope.
Yeah.
True. Zero trust enabled. True. Audit logging enabled. True. Host mode. FedRAMP enforcing. Things like that, right? So that was the famous screenshot that you see going around. We'll put it in this one. I'll send it to you, Keaton, so that you can see it. There's a lot to unpack in each of those, and so there is absolutely implementation and there's assurance. I'm really interested in how to utilize auditors, right? I think that's where a lot of the anxiety is coming from, because I came from audit. I think it's incredibly important. I mean, I'm obviously biased, right? It's been my livelihood for a long time. But there's two sides of security. There's implementation and there's assurance. You can't have security without assurance. And self-attestations are great, and robots are great, to help make it easy for auditors to check things, but there needs to be some sort of independent check. In my opinion, there needs to be an independent check on these capabilities, right?
Sure.
You cannot just take someone's word for it. You cannot rely on a tool alone, to do it. Tools are great. I mean, we have the same things in ours, right? But you can't just rely on what's in Paramify. There needs to be a way to continually check things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be that assurance side of it.
Yeah.
Yep, 100%. And because without it, it becomes, when you look at breaches or data getting compromised, most of those issues are not robot issues. They're process issues to people issues.
Right.
Which is why FedRAMP has a lot of controls built around process and people.
Yeah. Over half.
And you've got to control for those items in addition to all of the technical capabilities.
Yeah.
Because when you can cover both, that's where we get back to FedRAMP's actually a pretty great security standard.
Yeah.
And that's what the PMO will be doing now is let's maintain the standard. Let's just make the process more attainable.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I think of where things go wrong, literally, I mean, I just did a little, we did a little Hey Kenny thing on this, we could just based on a quick little discussion that we've had. I remember being at Black Hat at the keynote and at the keynote session, and I can't remember who the speaker was, but he talked. I do remember he talked about this tool called Sidewinder or something, and it would when it would be offensive security, right? So if someone DDoS you, go back and you'd actually attack the attacker, and it sounded really cool and illegal, but it sounded super cool. Anyways, that's what I remember about him. But what he said, I remember very distinctly, and it was my worldview. So I always say this all the time. I'm probably wrong, but maybe not. Maybe I'm not. I'm generally right. Okay. 95% of breaches came from change management, and which means process, now we will have more and more focus on automation, which is fantastic and needed. Absolutely. Do you need to do it? Are some things the whole screenshot, the screenshot audits, they're dumb, but they're dumb to people that have to take the screenshots, right? What auditors are trying to do is hey, I just need to see assurance, and looking at somebody's code sucks, right? It's not easy to do that, right? You can't just look at someone's code and go, oh yeah, that's awesome. You want to see that something's working, and so that's why people do screenshots. Can we do other things to make that process better? Absolutely. But when humans are controlling that, 95% of it, 95% of our issues are coming from those humans, right? So there's social engineering that happens. Can you social engineer an AI? Probably a lot easier than a human, even some humans, right? At first, right? And they might get smarter and more resilient, but I think we're a long ways away from that. So the process controls need to be audited, and also the configurations need to be checked. So when we're looking at these AI configurations, what we need to check for as an auditor is who has access to this? Who has access to this configuration?
Mm-hmm.
Who can change it, right? And what are the changes that have happened over some sort of period of time, right? And being able to produce some sort of automated thing. And then if those changes go under some automated, approval process, that's great. And that's how we set it up. But then, yeah, you need to see that the configuration actually does the outcome, right? So that's why it's so hard to get people to agree on standards. It's really hard. And so I'm just kind of rambling on. We never script these.
Well, so this is actually, I think it's a good point, Lana, and I like how it does kind of reinforce the way that the Pete and the FedRAMP office are approaching it, which is we don't have to like force you to do it a certain way, but the good principles of good security still have to be followed. And that's where I think, you know, like you're saying, you got to have assurance. And right now, nothing has changed. Like, it's all aspirational. We hope it does. We'll be part of it and hope everyone comes and be part of it. But the process is the process. We're going to keep pushing clients through and helping get their ETOs. PMO will be passing these things quick now, so the process will be faster. But I think the call out to your point is keep building great security. Keep doing the things to get a good security program in place, get an auditor, do all this stuff. Those principles still have to be followed. And then the process itself, the bureaucratic pieces of a note and all of that will improve. And we will be able to get to that end goal a little quicker.
Yeah. So I predict that implementing great security will still happen in the same way. And I predict also that getting assurance around security will happen kind of generally in the same
Largely the same way.
Right. So therefore, what do you do on the implementation side? Start with what do you know about the data coming into your environment? What does it touch? What are the people? What are the processes and the technology that's involved? Getting really clear on that. And that's where we can start. And the things that can be automated in there and made more streamlined, I think that's where we focus, right? That's on the implementation side. If it becomes really clear and really easy, you know, to see, you know, how your security plan is implemented, and you're comfortable with it as like the owner of the risk, guess what? You know, agencies, they're also going to be comfortable because your auditors are going to be comfortable. And that has to be where we're going. And it seems like that's where we're going.
Yeah. And now more so than ever, the agencies are the key. Which when you take a step back
is right.
It's right. If they own the risk, they always had to be. There was never a way for them to step fully out of the process.
That's right. So there was a problem with a CSP, right? So let's say you had a product and it has a FedRAMP sticker on its forehead, right? And you say, hey, we're FedRAMP. And it compromised like a military mission, right? There was some sort of breach that, you know, where, you know, the location of a platoon was exposed or something like that. And they'd be like, well, you know, shoot, is FedRAMP gonna own that risk? No way.
Yeah.
No, it would be ultimately the person who owns the risk is the end user of the software that was breached, right? And so they're gonna be like, hey, I'm not gonna use this software anymore, or hopefully there's a response, right? Pete talks a lot about that too. Issues happen, incidents happen, and we should normalize that. And you need to be nimble, and you have to have a way to respond to that, you know, so that we can mitigate risk, right? FedRAMP was always about, you know, mitigating risk. And so that does not mean spend a lot of time on your documentation. Right.
Yeah, if anything, it's the opposite, right? If
Right.
you can automate a lot of that reporting stuff, then you get to spend your time on real security work.
Right.
And this is where it comes full circle to like compliance. When you make the compliance process really difficult, that becomes the end goal. But it shouldn't be the end goal.
Right.
The end goal should be great security.
Yep.
And so that's why we're excited about these changes. Paramify's got some really cool stuff coming out on that reporting side.
And on the continuous monitoring, right? And continuous ATO.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Because even if you get a sticker on your forehead, I mean, I've already, you know, talked a little bit about this. If you get a SOC 2 sticker on your forehead, your vendor is gonna be like, great. That's awesome.
Definitely cool sticker.
Here's your
800-page questionnaire.
Yeah. Here's your questionnaire. Right. Because because it's just not reliable, right? Because if it's a buffet of controls,
Yeah.
they're gonna be like, okay, well, I know you at least
Well, and I think
you're peacocking as if you care about security.
that
All right, security theater, right?
the theater of compliance, and I think we'll see a lot of this too in agencies. FedRAMP is going to be uh, they're going to be holding a standard. They're going to be talking standards, but agencies are still going. It happens now. They just like, yeah, I want you to be FedRAMP moderate with this extra set of controls or with these additional things, or I want to see these items in this way. And I think we'll see even more of that, where the FedRAMP office, what they're doing is they're going to be providing the minimum standard. The agencies are still going to be able to say, that's well and good, that I want that, but I also want this and I want it to look in this way because again, they own the risk. And so this is where that partnership with agencies become even more important, and having good tools to automate things like Kanban reporting, continuous ATO are really important because then they're nimble and you can adjust them and change them to match what your agency wants to see.
Nimble, flexibility.
That's right.
Security, great security. One of the principles is flexibility, right? You have to be flexible in this nimble environment. So yeah, this is a super exciting time to be alive. Glad I'm here with you. Glad I'm here with you. You too can change FedRAMP.
That's right.
You
can be part of it.
Come be part of it. We'll put the links in the show notes. Yeah, we'll see you next time.